Alex, my man, appreciate you hopping on. It's been a minute since we both caught up. A lot of great things on both sides, pushing episode 175. But
Let's go.
TNT deal, new teams released for Unrivaled. What's got you excited these days? What's next? I mean, it seems like a whirlwind with Unrivaled every day.
Well, I tell everyone, listen, I'm a basketball guy, right? So the business side, while it's needed, it's fun. It keeps you on your toes, but I'm ready just to get to Miami, to be around the players, to watch them compete, to see them work out, to help put together a development system because that's my background. I'm ready for basketball, but also you just come off a season where you need to decompress and get away a little bit. But so that's what is next for us is just getting to the season and having high level competition.
In college, our coaches used to say 4% of the time is games, but it's really that other 96 that make up everything. And so for you, it's probably the similar 96% is building this league
Yep.
to get to the 4% of the actual games and everything. So I guess let's go back a little bit to the beginning. You've done a lot of cool stuff, especially in the basketball world.
Mm-hmm.
Where's this idea come from? When does it come? And when was it like, all right, we're pursuing this. Let's go all in.
Well, it's interesting because, I spent so much time on the NBA side working with athletes, and then I see firsthand what their off seasons look like. Let's just use the comparison and contrast. The women, they've done two things. They either go overseas to maximize earnings, and there's no break generally, there's no rest. You lose brand marketing opportunities, or you stay home and you get those brand marketing opportunities, you get that rest, but you don't have that competition that to develop you need. So the NBA players, they're going to Miami, LA, New York, they're together, they're working out every day. They're playing against each other 3 or 4 times a week. Like I was in the gym for these things. So you see what that offseason looks like. And for us, it was a combination of how do you solve something for the players? How do you get them together? How do you keep them home? How do you build their brands? But also how do you pay them a lot of money? How do you get them involved early to have the upside of ownership? So it was a pretty simple, easy basketball decision. This was built as a product. It was built to space the floor, have high level competition. And then all the business side fell into place. So it's been in the works for almost 2 years now and just trying to solve as many problems for the athletes and for the fans.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about the 3-on-3 component, why you went with that. And then as you delve into that, some of the uniqueness of the players, increased salaries, of equity, I believe, in the league as well. That would be helpful probably for everyone.
Well, this has been our calling card for, 2 years from now. 2 years ago was we wanted to create a game that was a little bit different than even the W's game. If you look at the finals, just how physical that series was. Generally, the game is played inside the 3-point line, not as much spaced out as the men's game. I personally love watching the WNBA, but we want to open the floor up a little bit. We want to showcase just how skilled these players are. So that's why the shortened court, we've played it with the NBA players. We've done it with our WNBA players. Like this is a game we've tested. So it's what we feel is a great mixture of traditional basketball, 3-on-3, still full court, not too much where it wears the players down. So all those things being in consideration. But to be honest with you, we looked at it from how do we create the most competitive product in the world. It was just trying to focus on 30 players to try to go get the best of the best. However many we could get would lead to a unbelievable product and competitions. And then when you look at those things, you don't have to pay 150 player, 144, now close to be 200 once expansion happens. Now it allows you to be a lot more aggressive with how you compensate the athlete, which is what you need, right? Like these players, these are business women. They're not doing it for charity. So you had to figure out how you could get the best of the best involved. It starts with comp and then equity and then branding and all those things that kind of come into a center point. So the first step for us was once we ideated this was go directly to Breanna Stewart, who was somewhat the market maker overseas, and figuring out what do you need to make this worth it? What does that look like for you and your family? So it was just a lot of very transparent conversations along the way with the athletes, because without them, we don't exist.
Yeah, sports in general, I think we're seeing that a lot across these emerging, and I don't even want to label you as an emerging league. You're an alternative to a very popular sport globally. But we're seeing, like in track, all of a sudden there's more money to pay athletes. In golf, there's all of a sudden more money. It's all built off the athletes. I'm curious, as you guys are building this, what the impact is from the international side. Like what's happening over there now, or what are the ripple effects?
Well, I think it's been awesome for the whole ecosystem, right? Like we can't employ everyone, all the players, even in the WNBA. So generally, the players that have been going overseas and making top dollar there, some of them are still going, but a lot of them are playing in Unrivaled now, which means there's another 30 job openings roughly overseas. And you're seeing those players now start to make more money because of that, right? So this is a truly a rising tide economically for all players in the WNBA, whether they're in our league or whether they're not in our league. And I think agents would be the first one to tell you that. Even China's added another roster spot for international players, which has made a difference. So, there's been a few players that we had, and they just got unbelievable offers, and we're like, well, yeah, go take that, right? Like we just want we want the players to maximize their earnings and visibility, and everyone has different circumstances. Everyone's in different parts of their careers. So we're pretty proud that we have had a major ripple effect across all leagues for the players.
Yeah, and what's your view on the current state of women's basketball in general? Obviously, immense popularity over the last couple years and been rising. Where do
Yep.
you see it today? Where do you see it going? What impact do you see Unrivaled playing in this?
Yeah, I think we're somewhat just getting started. It's it's funny because you can look at, of course, the new wave of rookies. They've had a huge impact, but also before that, the league was growing exponentially. So now you're hitting this inflection point where you're getting the best of both. A lot of the top players in the world right now are still in their 20s. That's pretty significant. The new players coming in, of course, are young. You're going to have Paige Beckers. You're going to have Flaugier. You're going to have Juju. Like there's more superstar level talent and brands coming into the league and coming in hopefully to Unrivaled very, very shortly. So I think where we play a role is if you would ask Kevin Durant or Kyrie Irving, like two guys I know pretty well that play a lot of offseason basketball, if you could get paid to show up and work out and play in the offseason, would you sign up for that? They'd be like, yeah, I'm doing it anyways. Right. So I think what we do is we fit into that offseason really well, and we provide a platform. And with our partnership with TNT, these brands are going to keep growing and they're going to keep making more money off the court as well, which is exciting. So I just think it's going to continue to compound. The interest is going to continue to compound because it's hitting mainstream now.
Yeah, and from there's a certain amount of players. So you bring in some really good rookies. How do
Mhm.
you did you increase the number of players, or what happens there?
Yeah, well, listen, we have a certain amount of roster spots. We're certainly going to increase some roster spots here shortly to answer that question. Also, we have some players on 1 year deals, 2 year deals, 3 year deals. Like a player who plays in our league for 1 year may decide I'm going to take the year off or I'm going to go overseas. So I think everyone's different. Even with the WNBA, you have injuries you have to take into account, right? So we are hopeful to return every single one of our players and add the new age of rookies coming in. But at the end of the day, we'll see. It's going to be player decision and case by case basis. But yeah, our goal is to only keep growing this and keep building it and making more opportunities for the players.
And when you look at the we'll call it emerging league landscape, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch across a lot of different sports. As you went to raise capital to bring on players,
Yep.
what was the pitch? What was the hey? Here's why we're different. Here's why we
Yep.
stand a big chance. Here's why you should bet on us and our team and allow us to go execute this. And then obviously it's starting to pay off with TNT. And I know there's a lot of other great
Yeah.
people involved.
Well, I think the original selling point was just star power. They're following their brands, unlike any other startup league where you're starting at the top, the best of the best. So having Breanna and Napheesa attached to that, having some other players who came in early, like a Chelsea Gray, and players like that had impact to show that we want to go after all the stars, not just a few. Because when you look at all leagues, just stepping back, the stars are the ones driving most of the revenue off the court, right? Ticket sales, merchandise, sponsorships. it's what gets people excited, and this is no different. So that was the selling point for us initially, and then obviously the business model. Like we can be aggressive in comp, but also build a very financially stable model that can hit profitability pretty quickly. So when you combine those two in a sport that everyone who follows sports can see that the records being broken, it was great timing for us to start this.
Yeah, and from NIL, name, image, and likeness, obviously that's had a big impact, especially on women's sports. If you look at it from Angel to Caitlin to now Juju, and you mentioned a bunch of handful of names. How do you see that playing? Do you see that as a rising tide? Do you see them carrying a lot more expertise and weight as they come into league versus veterans that maybe didn't go through it in college?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Our commissioner Mickey Lawler was president of WTA for 10 years. Like she ran women's tennis, and she's seen that was always the leader in the clubhouse when it came to dollars and individual brand. So I think what's interesting still is women's sports is not nearly as saturated as men's sports. Just at the top line level, you have NWSL, you have WNBA, you have now other leagues coming up like PWHL, but there's still not as many athletes on the women's side as the men's side, not as many major sports on the women's side as the men's side. So you're seeing brands start to shift dollars. Like we're seeing it right now with our league, and they're shifting dollars to the athletes because that's the return that they get. They are highly engaged, highly followed. You see even the direct correlation of the women's Final Four to the men's Final Four. They're outproducing men's games. And that's that. I put a tweet out the other week. The conversation has generally been, you know, with Caitlin it performs well, without Caitlin it doesn't, and that's not true. Like with Caitlin, you're looking at astronomical numbers. Without Caitlin, you're still looking at numbers that are breaking records and are going up against major men's properties, and I think that's the conversation. So what's great is there's so much data, but there's so many brands that have for so long looked at women's sports, but you're getting to a point where there's a real ROI now. That's the conversation. These aren't DEI investments; these are ROI investments, and brands are starting to showcase that with how they're shifting dollars.
Yeah, it's amazing to see. And you're a little bit more on the inside with the players themselves from a day-to-day basis, but there's this character development aspect, right? And you brought it up briefly, but and we'll just use Angel and Caitlin, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark for anyone, just for clarification. But and I don't know if some of it's orchestrated, if some of it's just natural, but they create this amazing storyline and they keep you constantly engaged, and you get the hate and you get the love on both sides, and ultimately that's what drives a lot. And people don't realize it, but you see that's helped men's sports immensely. How do you plan on, and I'm not saying from their standpoint or whatever, but how do you plan on building some of those storylines and that character development and that getting
Yeah,
people, you almost got to separate into both sides because that's where you get the audience.
sure.
What's the plan on that?
Well, I think forever sports has been driven with the conversation around it and debates. Who's the best player in the world? Who's going to win? What do we think of these matchups? And I think that's what we want to lean into with our league is matchups and players and rivalries. I think obviously you have to draw a line and make sure that the conversation is pointed towards sport and not towards anything else. But the biggest thing for us is the fact that, with what we're trying to do, we're going to create a level of access that fans haven't seen before. Our players are together, all of them under one roof for 10 straight weeks. So the content we're going to capture in practices, in post game, in off days, it's just going to lead to more intrigue and interest in knowing who these players are, who they gravitate towards. We're going to be in season during WNBA free agency, which is another interesting component that's going to be happening in real time. So I think all those things lead to generally just more interest. It's why you've seen docuseries of what happened with F1. People want the behind the curtain look at who these players are and what's going on outside of games.
Yeah, you're building like a reality show element to it to some degree, and that's probably not
Right.
the right word, but
Yeah,
you're
no,
getting that. Yeah,
it's raw. It's authentic and raw for sure.
yeah, and it's not easy to build a league though, and there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just the basketball game or the clips you see on social media. How's that journey been for you? What's
Yeah,
that
well,
look like behind the scenes a little bit?
where do you start? But I think you have to find the best people. So it started with the commissioner, our operational people, our content and branding team, of course, led by Kirby Porter. So it's just getting a bunch of great people in the room that understand that the athlete is the North Star. And as long as we keep that as our center focus, then we're going to produce really well. But there's so much that goes into it, right? There's liability coverage, there's permits, there's seating capacity, fire marshals having to sign off on it, ticket sales, merch sales, like all those things take time and have to go through general partnerships and conversations, and then counsel and legal gets involved. So that part I don't love, but it's a necessary evil. And of course, in order to pay these salaries and make sure this is long term, is you got to get great partners involved. We've certainly done that on the media rights side. We've done that on the brand side. We have a few more brands that we're going to be announcing here in the coming weeks. So I think that's the journey that's been exciting. Is this is going to be a great long-term business that has a ton of legs, and that the players hopefully can see more money on the back end than they ever will with what we pay them up front.
Very cool. And if someone, because like you mentioned, there's still a lot of surface area to explore in emerging leagues or just women's sports in general. If someone out there maybe has an idea, what would your advice be, or what's sort of the insight of where to find that gap or opportunity in obviously a different area? We don't need an unrivaled rival.
No. I think it's whichever sport it is. There's two ways to go about it, but both of them lead to you have to have eyeballs to sustain. You have to have people who are interested to watch your sport. I think what has happened with Kings League with Gerard Piqué and over there, like that's influencer led, but it leads to interest. It leads to eyeballs. And then for us, it was just going after the top talent in the world. If you have that top talent and you can get that top talent to buy in, then you have something that's intriguing. And that's just my stance, right? So that would be my advice. Is it comes back to your product. You can have the best marketing team in the world, you can have the best business model, but if you don't have a product that fans care about, it won't work anyway. So that is what I would tell anyone trying to start something from scratch, is just know that if you keep the product at the center focal point, then generally you'll be okay. And the market's going to tell you, right? That's the beauty of business. The market's going to tell you, investors are going to tell you. And you try to do as much background before you fully dive in as talk to a ton of people. I spent a year calling people, agents, athletes. John Skipper and David Levy got involved early. They ran ESPN and TNT, and just getting feedback, getting thoughts, being like, here's our strategy. What do you think? What's missing? So there's so much that is exploratory before you just dive in and say, I'm going to raise money, I'm going to launch a league. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and from off that, so you have the media rights, and that's a traditional sports path. You're talking about the behind the scenes. That's a little bit different than we see. What are some other ways, or where do you have some ideas to not just do cool things, but like innovate a sports league, a sports property in general, do some new things, at least try some new things?
Yeah, well, we have like an educational content component with the athletes, where the next generation of players can now learn from the stars and learn how to train and learn how to work on their bodies and recover and do these things. So that's going to be an interesting thing that I think is going to make us unique as opposed to much more traditional leagues. That we're pretty excited about that, because it affects the drop-off rate in women's sports. You can see that hit a cliff once they hit high school, and we want to be the reason that it continues upwards. So that's number one. Number two, what's really unique on the cultural side of basketball that's a revenue generator for us is our one-on-one tournament. It sits in the middle of our season, single elimination. The top four players get paid. Top player making $250K if they win. So what's cool about that is culturally, what Napheesa's always said is young girls grow up in organized formats in basketball. They go to practices, games, you have trainers now, but there's not a lot of roll the ball out, play your friends, go to the park. You don't see a lot of orchestrated women's basketball games. So I think having the best in the world roll the ball out and play ones on live television and put themselves out there, I think it'll lead to younger girls being like, well, let me go play with my friends, right? If this is acceptable to do, let me go do those things. So it's getting through that mental hurdle. And I know firsthand the men would never do it, because it's a risk. It's a brand risk. There's egos. There's, Like no one wants to look stupid. Everyone wants to claim they're the best in the world. Of course, one-on-one's much different than traditional basketball, but I think that's what we're most proud to bring to life in year one. That opens up a revenue stream for us as well.
Yeah, very cool. I do like the education component because you'd think more leagues would take that approach. Nate, I'll be with you in 2 minutes. Alex, finishing here, trends you're seeing in the market, or just overall things that got you excited.
Well, trends in the market, I think it's just seeing how impactful social media is to your overall business, especially in women's sports now. You're getting coverage from major outlets, Bleacher Report, SA Today, SBJ. Like you used to have to pay for those things, right? I think that's what's exciting is we're hitting mainstream. And then secondly, it's just where are these brands? Like when we launched this league of social following of players, we were at like 5 million collectively. Same exact rosters now above 20 million collectively. Like that's in a span of 18 months. So that excites me the most because I truly believe we're just getting started, and these players should be the ones to reap that benefit. And what's great about this is they're all owners. We're all rowing in the same direction. We've been so unique with this format and startup because generally the players, the owners, the league, they're all kind of pulling in different directions. But because we're all sitting at the same table and rowing in the same direction, I think it's going to lead to things that we can accomplish that no one else has really even thought of before.
I love that, and super exciting. This was awesome, Alex. Appreciate you hopping on. Where can people learn more? Where can people get tickets? Where should they go to make
Yeah.
sure to tune in, to make sure to show up to things? What's
Yeah, well, you can follow us on our social handles, Unrivaled Basketball. Uh, Unrivaled.basketball is our website, which will be up to date. So we'll have tickets dropping next month. We're going to have our teams actually fully formed and announced next month as well of who's playing on which team, which players are on which team, as well as the head coaches, which we have a lot of big names we're going to be announcing there. So there's so much cool stuff that's going to be coming out. But you can find us anywhere on social. We're there and we're pretty active.
love it?